President of the Assocham, Shri Vineet Agarwal ji, Secretary General, Mr. Deepak Sood, Mr. Balaji, Chairman of the Assocham National Council on Digital Communications, all the distinguished members on the dais, captains of industry, and all the friends who have come to join the Assocham AGM today. My very warm welcome to you and thanks to you for giving this patient listening session. I was thinking, what should I speak on? There were three topics in my mind. The first topic was that let me focus purely on technology because this is supposed to be a technology focused AGM. Second thought was that let me give a bigger picture of where railways is going, what is the thought process. And the third option was where the country is going. What's the thought process on the Indian economy, how we have come out of the COVID crisis and where we are taking the country to, nation's economy to. I thought let me focus on the third topic because that is one topic on which probably if you get a general picture, the broader picture, the whole framework, that will help you in deciding your own sector strategies and your own company strategies. So I took the permission of the chairperson of the president and requested him, asked him whether can I speak beyond the topic. He was very gracious enough and said that, sir, please speak on whatever you think. So I'll speak on the third option. So let's take a step back, go a couple of years back, sometime around this time when the first news of COVID from China came, Corona, Wuhan, we don't know what it is, what's going to be the scenario. The whole world was under a severe stress because something totally unexpected had hit, and the severity with which it had hit the global economy, the global supply chains, the cities, the communities, the families, it was like we don't know how to respond. Luckily in India we have a very strong leadership which is clear thinker, absolutely clear on where to go and fully focused on clear vision, clear execution. So we took certain steps. While the steps to manage COVID and contain further propagation of the virus were taken in a set, there was another parallel thinking going on. We knew that yes, the economy is going to take a big hit. So what should be our strategy for reviving the economy, saving the economy, and then getting onto a consistent growth path? So that is the story I wanted to share with all of you. It's a bit technical, but I would like to make it very, very simple language. There will be lots of numbers, but hopefully that will not make you fall asleep. So where were we at the end of fiscal 21, FY21? Basically, we were at a GDP nominal basis of about 198 trillion rupees. 198 lakh crore rupees. Lakh crore is trillion. So I'll consistently use trillion, that is easier to pronounce. So 198 trillion we were at that point of time. What is the structure of our economy? We are a emerging economy. We are a country where lots of things have to be built. We are a country where there is a huge population which can be put to productive use. But still we are an economy which is predominantly consumption driven. So this 198 trillion rupees economy, close to 116 trillion comes from consumption, which is about 59% of the GDP. 53 trillion comes out of investment, which is about only 27%. Where do we want to go? What have other countries like South Korea, China, Japan, Germany in its initial phase of growth. What did these countries do? Or US after the Great Depression, the Second World War period? What did they do? They raised the investment level to almost 40, 42, 45% for a very consistently long period of time. We were at 27% of investment, 27% of GDP as the investment. So the root cause of our economic issues was identified as a weak investment environment. Now, this thing, weak investment, has a tendency to feed into itself. How does it feed into itself? If there is a weak investment, then there are less jobs. Less jobs means less people have enough income to buy more things, put money in housing, put money in cars, put money in making sure that, okay, let me buy some extra shares, I've got some surplus income, let me buy some shares of this company. All those investment activities, they get truncated down, they get dissipated, they get attenuated. So with that as the cycle, it gets into a vicious downward spiral. So how do we get out of it? If the root cause is weak investment, then the solution has to be investment. Now where will the investment come from? Investment has to come either from private sector, all of us present here in this room, or government sector, people like me. So where would that government investment come from? Does the country's balance sheet, does the government balance sheet has that kind of capability? That was the question which was before all of us. So we analyzed the Government of India's balance sheet. What is Government of India's balance sheet at the end of fiscal 21? We had a liability, central government liabilities were about 112 trillion rupees, 112 lakh crore. Now that amount is close to 60% of GDP. 60% of GDP, central government liabilities, is a fairly comfortable position. All of you work in the, when you see your balance sheets, you will always look at your EBITDA to debt ratios or your DSCR and all those ratios you look. If you look at the country's balance sheet, a 60% central government liability, 60% of GDP as the central government liabilities, is a very comfortable position. There are hundreds of other examples where even 95%, even more than 100% examples are there. And total public debt is 200% of GDP, 250% of GDP. Those examples are also existing. Very good, wealthy countries, healthy economies, they are also having that kind of thing. So we analyzed and we came to the conclusion that we are at a situation which is a fairly reasonable number, and we have enough fiscal space to be able to use that space and kick-start the investment cycle. So with that as the analysis and that as the backdrop, we took a target that this 27% investment level, we should target in the coming few years, we should bring this 27 to 35. How do we bring that 30? How do we bring it? We have to start the public investment cycle. Once the public investment cycle starts, that feeds into the private investment, and that starts the virtuous cycle. This is something which has been done in hundreds of examples are there across the world. Germany did it in its initial phase of development. After the Great Depression, US did it, Japan did it, China did it for many, many decades. South Korea did it when it was in its growth phase. So we decided to leverage the country's balance sheet and start the public investment cycle. So now balance sheet is one part, P&L is the second part. So what is country's P&L? Country's P&L, central government's P&L, if you look at it in that fiscal, was roughly on the receipt side, we are roughly 22 trillion rupees gross tax revenue, and net tax revenue after taking out the state government share is about 15 trillion rupees for the Indian government, central government. And about non-tax is about 3 trillion rupees, 3 lakh crore. So about 18 lakh is the total, 18 lakh crore, 18 trillion is the total receipts that the government of India gets on the revenue side. Where was our budget? Our budget was about 35 trillion rupees. So how much do we have to fund? We have to fund the balance 35 minus 18, 17 trillion rupees to be funded. So the challenge here was, should we take the leap of faith and use the country's balance sheet to take the country out of this crisis, take it on a consistent growth path, or should we remain very conservative? Should we not take enough debt? Should we continue to focus on the fiscal consolidation? Those were the questions before us. We decided to take the leap of faith. As a country, we decided to take the leap of faith. And Prime Minister Modi Ji was so clear in his thinking that whatever nothing wrong about being a big economist kind of people, but many of them who kept on saying that no, just do consumption, send checks. Many countries did that, US did that, and see what condition they are in today. We all know what condition US is in today. Many other European countries followed that prescription of the Nobel laureates, and they are in a very bad situation. We decided to choose the path which had 3 elements. The first element was public investment. The second element was very focused consumption. And the third element was reforms and incentives for private investment. This is the path we decided to take. Now, coming to these 3 things, on the public investment side, the major decision which was taken in the last year's budget was we increased the capital investment to 5.5 trillion rupees. Public capital investment, public capex to 5.5 trillion rupees. And we committed to the nation that this is a number which is going to go up in future. This is not going to go down. I'll come in the later part, what are the results. First I'm speaking about what was the thought process at that point of time. So 5.5 trillion rupees investment, it was a substantial number. First time somebody had thought of such a large number of investment to be put in from the public budget. And there were questions by many specialists, many economists that no, this will not work. India doesn't have the capacity to absorb so much investment. India doesn't have the talent pool or the shovel-ready projects to be taken up for this kind of capital investment. All those big question marks were raised in large conferences and all. But Prime Minister's conviction about this path was absolutely clear. Finance Minister's understanding of this process was crystal clear. The facts which were driving us to take this path were absolutely clearly laid out. So we decided to go whole hog on this path. And the results are in front of us. If we purely look at 5-6 factors, all of you, this is probably a tech-oriented community, but people who are in the brick and mortar industries, that time generally the capacity utilization of factories was at 60, 65, 70%. 1 year later, that is in fiscal 22, we have seen the capacity utilization coming to about 80-85. Still not 100%, but still significantly more than what it was a fiscal before. I'm sure those of you who are in brick and mortar, you would vouch. I'm interacting with lots and lots of industries. Practically, there are many sectors which have already reached 1995 and started thinking of new projects, new factories, new plants. But a significant number still has come to a comfortable level of 80-85% capacity utilization. The GDP target that we took at that point of time was from 198 trillion, we thought that we should be able to reach 225 trillion rupees. 225 lakh crore GDP we should be able to reach. We surpassed that target and reached 232 trillion rupees. So the thought process we had was clearly validated. On consumption side, which again, if you put money in the economy and people start getting wages and salaries and newer income out of that, then people start buying things. So last Diwali was a clear example of how people's mindset has changed. People started coming out to shops, started buying things, starting investing in housing, started putting money in stock market, started buying cars, all kind of the needs which were suppressed for quite some time because the economic outlook was uncertain got cleared and people started coming out in large numbers for getting back into buying things, living life in a better way, looking at the future in a more positive way. So our consumption, which we had targeted 70 trillion rupees, came out to 69 trillion, which was very good. I'm sorry, 125, consumption which we had targeted 125 trillion rupees came out to 133 trillion rupees, which was a good, healthy number. And investment, which is what our main target is, increasing from 27 to 35% of GDP, grew from 27% to 29%. Now this is a first year of capital investment. As we all know, when we take a large capital investment project, it takes 3 or 4 years to actually come to fruition, come to commissioning. So it takes 3 or 4 years. So that cycle has started from 27, we have come to 29, and based on the success of our thought process, this year's budget, again, a record number of capital investment, record amount of capital investment has been budgeted. 7.5 trillion rupees, 7,50,000 crore rupees. It's a unheard of number in Indian economic history, and the results of last year's 5.5 lakh capital investment is now visible, and based on that we have taken a 7.5 lakh. So if we look at pure modeling point of view from this investment, 7.5 trillion rupees investment with a multiplier of a modest 3.6 means this will add to the Indian economy 22.5 trillion rupees, 3.5 times, 22.5 trillion rupees it will add. Imagine how much of that will come to all of you. Entire amount goes into the industry, and the way our economy is structured, close to 60% of this, that is 13 trillion rupees, 13 lakh crore, will go to the MSME sector. That's the way our economy is structured. You take, let's say, for a classic example, a high-speed railway project, or a new railway line, or the Central Vista. Any project that we take goes through a cycle of close to 25 to 30 series of transactions. So let's say the high-speed railway project, right? So the viaduct construction is going on. Now, whatever amount the government invests in this viaduct construction, it goes to steel makers, cement makers, the people who are supplying the construction equipment, the people who are doing the geotechnical investigation, the people who are doing the transportation of all these materials. That is the first cycle. Then comes the next cycle. Let's say the steel makers. So steel makers will be paying to their raw material suppliers, coke suppliers, iron ore suppliers, to the blast furnace makers, to the maintenance people of all those large machines. Now, that is the second level. Now the third level will be, let's say, the blast furnace maker. Now the blast furnace manufacturer will be paying to a large number of people who are doing some press machines they are running. There is a small welding shop which is there. There is a small machining shop which is there. So that is the way money gets a velocity, and it starts propagating into the economy from one level to second level to third level to fourth level to fifth level till it gets finally dissipated. And the result of that is close to 10 trillion rupees, 10 lakh crore, will go as wages and salaries. Now all that wage and salary again jumps into, okay, I've got a good salary this time, I got 8% income raise, then people will start buying things. So that means there is a demand for other goods. There is a demand for tables, demand for air conditioners, demand for housing, demand for TV, demand for clothes, demand for good food. Everything then starts coming into a cycle. So that starts the virtuous cycle. Then capital which gets generated out of this process. There is consumption, then there is saving. So the capital which gets generated out of this process, this 7.5 trillion rupees, that is 11 trillion rupees will be the capital which gets generated out of this. Now that capital becomes the base for the next investment cycle. That is the capital which becomes the base for the next investment cycle. If the corporates, if the individuals, if the companies, they don't save, then how will they invest? That is the entire thought process. So it was a bit heavy session, I'm sure, but I see only a few people dozing off, so that gives me a bit of try to keep it very light, but it was heavy subject. So this is the way we decided on the public investment cycle. And on the focused consumption, which was the second element of our strategy, was Prime Minister said very clearly, कितनी भी तकलीफ हो, किसी को, किसी भी परिवार को, किसी भी व्यक्ति को भूखे नहीं सोना पड़ेगा. He take a very clear, you know him, he thinks very clearly and he decides in a very focused way. देश भर में कहीं पर भी किसी को भूखे नहीं सोना पड़ना चाहिए. That's the way he decided, he thought and he executed. 80 crore families over last 2 years almost have been given free food grain all across the country. And executed in a very, very meticulous manner. कहीं से देश भर में इस विषय में कोई कंप्लेंट नहीं. इस सेवा भाव के साथ, इस भावना के साथ कि देश में कोई भूखा न सोए, we decided, see, abstract economics is one thing, but the real human angle of it, that's a bigger challenge. So Prime Minister focused very clearly on execution of feeding the people, making sure that food reaches the lowest of the lowest rung of the society, remotest corner of the country, and we all worked as one team and made sure that that focused consumption, the focus on poor, the focus on feeding the people was executed properly. And then the third leg of our entire thought process was reforms and incentives for private investment. So the PLI scheme was launched. How many of you are beneficiaries of PLI scheme? At least 1, 2, 3, not many. Okay, 4. So I've interacted with many of the companies who have availed PLI, and it has made a significant difference. It has made a big difference because the disadvantage that we have in our economy because of various factors, higher cost of logistics, the inefficiency in many processes, the compliance burden, all those things lead to a cost disadvantage, and PLI is supposed to meet that cost disadvantage. And the results are in front of us. Electronics manufacturing was nothing, a very small industry, and today it is $75 billion industry, growing at double-digit CAGR, clearly on the path to reach $250 billion in 5 years. So that's the benefit. That's the clear demonstration of success of the PLI scheme. Telecom sector, 35 companies have started manufacturing telecom equipment using the PLI, and we are becoming exporters, whereas few years back we were purely importers of almost all, everything electronic, everything telecom, and today we are exporters of that. And it's just the beginning. The growth has just started. The way growth will go is like this. That is the way growth will go. Reforms, huge reforms in mining, good reforms, not very, still not satisfied, Mr. Balaji, but lot more to do. But good, significant reforms in telecom, significant reforms in removing compliances, close to 1,000 odd archaic laws have been removed, close to 35,000 odd compliances have been eliminated, and the results are there. This year the exports are touching $400 billion. It's a number which we had never thought in our country, but today exports are touching $400 billion. So, and the growth path is visible. So with these three as the big legs, the big directions of our thinking, the economy came out of a severely bad situation, of a big stress, once in a century stress, and today we are at a 8% plus growth rate. And I believe, I have a little bit of understanding of economics, we follow this capital investment strategy for 5-6 years more, we can grow at 8% consistently for next 20 years. And 8% growth next 20 years means every year close to 1.5 crore new employment, close to 35 lakh people coming out, 35 million people coming out of poverty line every year. That's the change we can bring in our society by this thought process. So that's the thought process Prime Minister has clearly implemented. Over last 2 budgets you have seen the difference, and this thought process will continue and take our country on a new growth path. Thank you very much.